Okay, I just had a really, really scary Trayvon Martin moment here in Wetumpka, Alabama. I was standing here on the side of the river, just getting some sun and some fun, and this older gentleman, he said he was 71, elderly white, as he described himself, angry white man, from rural Alabama, and still lives in rural Alabama on the other side of bloody Birmingham. We started talking. He started talking about, mostly it was him talking, and I decided that he really wasn't going to listen. He started talking about his Republican views, and he said he's a conservative Republican and all that stuff, and I'm listening, and I just kept reassuring him. I said, listen, we're just two guys standing here by the river, let's have this conversation. And, we were talking about politics and how, Mitt Romney this and how the media has distorted different things. And so, of course, each of us thinks that the other has a distorted view of reality as presented in the media. And the reality is, I think, as we probably both do. With that said, because if he's watching Fox and I'm watching MSNBC, I'm watching Reverend Al and he's watching Hannity, then yeah, we have a very different view of America, of Mitt Romney, of Obama. But I always try and ask people, do we have a very different view of us, two guys standing here, two Americans standing here, two Alabamans, with deep roots here in Alabama, standing here by this beautiful river. And I asked him, he was mad at the EPA for putting, restrictions on small business owners to upgrade their fiberglass tanks. And already Walmart had come into communities, he said, depleted salaries and within a 5-mile radius by $5. And what else did Walmart do? They just put out, he said that he had a tire business that opened, that was there, and then 2 miles away, Walmart opened with their super center. He said before monthly he would sell 40 sets of tires, but after Walmart came, he would sell 10. So, his tire business is really struggling. And again, we're just two guys standing by the river. And finally, somehow we get on this real notion of freedom, because I asked him, man to man, like I really wanted to know what his experience as as a white man, who was a young white man, during the time period that he said, we'd be speaking German if we hadn't fought Hitler. Well, we'd be speaking German if, for many other reasons other than Hitler. But anyway, I said, since you brought up that period, what was Jim Crow? I really wanted to know what Jim Crow was like for him. We talk about it a lot. I've talked about it a lot in my videos, this period of integration, segregation. He said he had never heard of the term Jim Crow. He had never heard it called that. I'd never heard Jim Crow, first of all. Second of all, he called it integration, as if it was like, oh my God, they did this thing, the blacks. And so we got to talking about freedom, and I kept asking him, and he agreed that on some levels, not in racial equality, but the integration is good, a distinction. And finally I said to him, I explained to him my situation, since he was also being quite confessional about his life. And I said, here I am, a gay American who is 9 years into a civil partnership, and I don't have as many rights as he has. Well, what can you do with marriage other than common property? So again, he has no clue of the hundreds of rights, perhaps even thousands of rights that are granted under the notion of marriage. And so again, I want to say that he doesn't even know the impact of such a deep ignorance. And of course, through this, he had quoted the entire story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I debated it. Instead of sort of coming out as a non-Christian in the first place, I thought that might have made him pop out of his skin. I told him what my critical thoughts about Sodom and Gomorrah were, and other kinds of, humanist interpretations. And of course, he rejected those, and he rejects the idea. He has this conflict, the conservative conflict between, he said he and I identified as Southerners, and that what the South is about independence. It's not about that, he said slavery. He went there. He said, 1861, it wasn't about slavery. It's that we didn't want the government to tell us what to do. And so finally I asked him, because he said back then, people try and distort history, he said, because my people weren't slave owners, the slave owners, and this is where it got juicy. He said the slave owners, they were 1%. And I said, oh, so now we're the 99%. I didn't have to make that leap old man made that link anyway. The 99% now, the 99% then. I said, okay. So he acknowledges that we're actually the 99%, he and I. But oh no, because I don't deserve marriage. So we're the 99%. We were the 99%. Then the people who were even more slightly empowered, not a few, stood up, but far many were more complacent about the system of slavery, even especially the white non-slave owning peoples who were, as he says then, part of the 99%. But what I understand now is he didn't recognize that as the 99% then, pre-slavery, they were actually, the slaves were part of that 99%. And as he said, they are part now, and that slave mentality, that ignorance that keeps us spinning round and round each other, evades me. Now, this is when I had to jet off, and this is when I had my Trayvon Martin moment. We were talking about freedom. The conversation was getting a little heated, but I kept sort of trying to, disarm him, because I said, I really want to know, and B, I don't want to be out here fighting no old white man. But then he said, then he brought up guns and freedom. Oh, if I have a gun in my car and I want to be out here and shoot you, I ought to have it freedom. And I said, sir, I'm sorry, I have to go. I think you might have a gun in your car. Bye. And the fact is, I'm a young black man here in Alabama, and that's a 71-year-old native Alabama, and he sounds like he knows I ain't from here. And that scares me to think that I would have to be in a Trayvon Martin situation just because I decided to walk down the river and see the same ducks. These are the ducks that the old man pointed out to me when I was standing down there. I moved down here, and so did they. They moved upstream too.